view on the topic. My name is Ilke. As I said, I work for G-STIC as a program director, and we really look at how we can build bridges between the research ecosystem, the financiers, the implementing agencies, and the complete innovation ecosystem. And I'm going to do a quick introduction to the session, and then I will introduce all the speakers who will have their own presentation, and then we will go into a panel discussion at the end to have some Q&A. So happy to see all of you to engage. In the race against climate change, innovation is critical. Emerging economies are brimming with innovative solutions to climate and development challenges, from community-based resilient tools to locally made clean tech. But even the best technologies can stall and struggle to go beyond pilot phase without the right financial and policy environment and a national innovation ecosystem that supports them. There is a need for both technology push mechanisms by supporting for RD&I to identify breakthrough technologies and long-term gains, as well as demand pool facilitators with a clear strategy to create a market demand that can de-risk green tech investments and encourage private sector scale-up. But how do we align both of these? Which policies are needed to enable a complete pathway having both elements aligned in such a way that public and private finance funds scale and unlock investments to the fullest? And how is the innovation landscape evolving in the rapid changes world we face today? As I said, we have 5 amazing speakers to answer all of these questions, and we will, and I'm happy to announce the first keynote speaker, Dr. Nguyen Dan Mao. Dr. Mao is a deputy acting director from IMEN, the Research Center for Agricultural Meteorological in Vietnam, under the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment. His expertise focuses on climate services, climate smart agriculture, climate modeling, and climate risk assessments to support sustainable development in Vietnam. He has led multiple projects on climate technologies and policies bridging science, finance, and practice. Dr. Mao will bring the story on how IMEN, as an RTO from Vietnam, scales innovation beyond the borders of the Institute. Dr. Mao, the floor is yours.
No need. Thank you so much, Ike. Good afternoon, everybody. So, before starting, I would like to introduce myself first. My name is Mao, Nguyễn Đăng Mao. I'm from the Vietnam Institute of Meteorology, Hydrology, and Climate Change under the Ministry of Agriculture and Environment. So before starting, I would like to say thank you so much for organizing CSIR, Vito, inviting me to be here to have a very, very small talk about the situation in Vietnam. And I'm very, very happy to see all of you here. So, in my presentation today, because of the limitation of time, so I will highlight how Vietnam linking science, service, and finance to scale climate smart agriculture for resilience and sustainability. So, so here one case study in our process, our work. So first of all, I would like to show you about our country climate and agriculture context. So in our country, agriculture sector contribute about 12 to 14% of Vietnam's GDP and employs more than 35% of population. And agriculture, it is among the most climate vulnerable sector in Vietnam. Because the climate change, the increasing in temperature and the increasing in very, very high rainfall, floods, and extreme heat and super typhoon increase in Vietnam. For example, last year in 2024, the very severe super typhoon Yagi came to our country, and the typhoon resulted in over 300 deaths and missing persons, and destroyed thousands of homes and caused economic loss about 2.3 billion US dollar. It's about 1.5% of our country GDP. And so in the future, our climate change projection, the climate, for example, temperature and extreme event projected increase in both frequency and intensity, and then very, very complicated, especially in scenario. In Vietnam, the extreme scenario, the scenario may also be about 1 meter by the end of the 21st century. So you can see in the picture here, if the scenario about 1 meter, about 38.5% of our Mekong River Delta in the South Vietnam, this agriculture area Vietnam will be inundation, replaced by scenario. Thus, that's why now Vietnam is shifting from reactive coping to proactive climate smart management. In this, we try to linking science, service, and finance to strengthen resilience. This transformation is not optional. It's essential for food security and green growth. I think this is the same situation with many, many countries in the world. So in Vietnam is now shifting. So among our country situation, so about our institute. So my institute is the Vietnam Institute of Meteorology, Hydro, and Climate Change. We have the headquarters in Hanoi, and we have the sub-institute in Ho Chi Minh City. So is the climate survey here, we work very, very closely with UNDP and with the Met Office in United Kingdom, with the Laura and with FAO, and also we work with Vito also. You see here we have the very close work. We have the MOU with the Vito in study about climate in Vietnam. So to strengthen our capacity in studying climate. This is ourselves, I mean here the indoor technology to improve our climate information. So our user here, our user rank from international cooperation. For example, the Petro Vietnam is between the Vietnam and Russia company, to local provincial authority and farmer. We support the climate information for them to help them translate climate information into zero decision. So that's about the financing, the R&D pathway. So turning the science into practice require blended financing. So in Vietnam, we try to combine from the public R&D fund and from the international co-financing. For example, we have some projects from DCF, UNDP, GSS, World Bank, ADB, and we also have the fund from provincial and private contribution. For example, here we have the project funded by GCF. In this project, in hand, we have been enhancing resilience for small-scale farmer in the local province. This blended model has enabled us to move from research concept to the implementation. In this project, we, how can I say, we work with a local farmer and to discuss with them and define the needs of them. And then we try to make the climate product as the needs of them. And then we ensure all the climate information they will use for the decision. So about the infrastructure and digital foundation, in Vietnam now we have developed national climate agricultural data infrastructure, including here we own the climate, weather and climate data we develop in the digital hub. And from the daily to weekly, monthly, annual, and the position in the future data. And we also integrated agro-meteorological station. In Vietnam, we have some about 35 agro-meteorological stations across Vietnam. And we also do the digital advisory platform under NFCS pilots. We have some project pilots NFCS for some province in Vietnam, and we also have data. However, now we have facing some major challenges. Here is mostly about the data interoperability. I mean here is how to connect the information across the ministry, across sector, across province. So, and now we're still developing this structure, this data structure. And in the future, in this project, our vision is digital transformation for delivering climate service and CSIR national way. About the policy and legislation interaction. So, in Vietnam, my institute under the ministry and our research directly fits into national policy. For example, here we are the Institute for Developing the Vietnam Climate Change Scenario and National Framework for Climate Service and National Action Plan on Agriculture and Climate Change and National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy and strategy for meteorology and hydrology development. Many strategy policy we as our research directly fits into. So this strong policy alignment allows our research outcome to be mainstream and scale. And so to do this, we need effective feedback loops between the policy research and the markets. So about our country innovation ecosystem here, you know Vietnam has the same, similar to many countries now. Vietnam is now moving towards a green transformation and also net zero in 2050. And we also expanding collaboration with financial institutions, enterprise, and NGO. And in this time, the opportunity for CSIR are expanding in digital agriculture and AI early warning system and green finance. So the important thing I think here is that now we just and women are become key actor of the our activity here. So about the challenges and bottlenecks, the challenges, especially, I think it's the same in medical field. Limited private sector participation and lack of long-term financing for R&D and gap in data government, and many farmer and small and medium enterprise SME still have no access to tailor financial product and climate risk assessment tool. And we think this is where innovation in finance become critical. So about the, I show here one example project for the visible sustainable impact. This project funded by GCF and IMHAM, our institute is implement in climate service in this project. So in this project, through this project, more than 130,000 people, smallholder, have received the CSIR advisory. And after 5 years project, we have some validation. And from our early warning model, we reduce crop loss by about 10 or 50% in drought-prone areas. And scaling up this project, and now we are working for new project, the scaling that to green finance. Juniors, but truly we need financing to scale project. That's why we are piloting the green climate finance facility. To this, we're linking with Vietnam Development Bank by green credit scoring with the climate data and CSIR adaptation. We think this approach aims to unlock private investment and build a national green lending ecosystem and strengthen the connection between science, finance, and practice. And so the last slide, scaling CSIR require an integrated approach, science, policy, and finance working together. Just now, for the next 5 years, we're trying to finish our national framework for climate service. Now we're working with the Met Office in United Kingdom and UNDP and some international organizations to help Vietnam to develop the NFCS. And we're linking the CSIR with green credit scoring through the Vietnam Development Bank and expand the digital platform for climate service. And from our experience, we think from lab to markets, our goal is not only innovation, but transformation for resilient and sustainable future. Okay, thank you so much for the attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mao. I have to pull up. My apologies for standing there. to guide the time, but I want to have enough time for all our speakers to present, of course. But thank you very much for laying the outline a bit of what an RTO goes through to scaling. I think you told a lot of things that a lot of RTOs can relate to, and it's nice that you directly align with policy and markets and that you have feedback loops. That's something very interesting to look into and love to discover more. And thank you for touching also on the lack of funding and access to innovation from grassroots communities. That is something that we really have to take into account and to work towards all together. And I love your end quote, not only working towards innovation, but transformation. That should indeed be the goal. Thank you very much, Dr. Mao. Our next speaker will be Mr. Kwan Solomon. Mr. Kwan Solomon is a green finance analyst with over 7 years of experience in climate change and sustainable development. He holds a master in philosophy in development finance from Stellenbosch Business School and has a track record of leading and managing green economy initiatives that align with national climate finance agenda. Currently at Green Cape Sector Desk Development Agency, he leads initiatives to facilitate job creation and investments in the green economy. His expertise includes project management, stakeholder management, and mobilizing significant capital for green initiatives. Mr. Solomon.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for that introduction, Ilke. Thank you for the opportunity as well to speak here today. Going after the keynote speaker, I'm hoping your expectations are lowered, but that introduction was a bit hectic, so hopefully you can bring it back. But yes, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kwan Solomon. I'm a green finance analyst from an organization called Green Cape. Just to share about Green Cape, my organization is a not-for-profit organization focused on green economy. So essentially what we focus on is removing barriers to economically viable green economy solutions. When we mention green economy, we speak of sectors focused in renewable energy, which includes a division of smart mobility as well, circular economy and waste, smart agriculture, sustainable agriculture, water, wastewater, as well as green finance, which kind of supports each of those sectors. So I'm from the green finance team, and essentially we work with identifying a pipeline of projects within each of those sectors and translating that pipeline for investable opportunities for financiers. So I do a lot of talking for a living, and I should be more prepared for this presentation, so I'm hoping it goes well. But yes, so my organization, Green Cape, has been in existence for about 15 years, so since 2010. Essentially, our North Star is jobs and investments within the green economy, and to date we facilitated close to 22,000 jobs, as well as facilitated 70 billion rand in investments. This is not through direct investments, but rather unlocking those barriers, publishing market intelligence reports outlining the economic opportunities in those green economy sectors, and basically hosting platforms where we can bring together investors to then invest in green economy solutions. So that's us at a high level. Those are the sectors we cover, and we do a number of projects across the board. So the purpose of this presentation is to overview the climate finance landscape within South Africa specifically, which was a project we done in 2023, basically with the project partner, the Climate Policy Initiative, which is an international policy climate finance tracker, for our client, the Presidential Climate Commission of South Africa. So essentially this program or reports was used to track the domestic climate finance flows within the country. And when we say climate finance, this being in accordance with National Treasury's Financing a Sustainable Economy paper, so looking at national or local, national, and international climate finance flows from public and private sources that are directed to covering the cost of transitioning to a low-carbon economy or climate resilient economy that looks to building resilience against current and future impacts of climate change. Essentially how this report tracked finance was through primary data collection, so through surveys with domestic commercial banks, domestic finance players, institutional investors, as well as international secondary data sources like your BNEF, your OECD data, as well as the INJ data as well. So essentially some of the key findings from the report, if you look at the Sankey diagram, was that there was about 131 billion rand annual average in climate finance track for the years 2019 to 2022, sorry. So every year about 131 billion rand average that was tracked for climate finance, which is quite a huge number if you do reflect. And you could see majority of that finance did come from commercial banks and commercial finance institutions, with about 70 billion rand of that. If you do focus, I'm not sure if there's a laser. Majority of that was dispersed as debts as well, and most of it going into mitigation attempts and clean energy. So just moving along, majority of that finance was actually raised domestically, with 91% of the track climate finance being from domestic sources, and majority of that being from commercial banks and institutional investors. Yeah, and then the financial institute or instruments that it was dispersed at was debt. So I think this speaks to our local commercial banks' comfortability with engaging with renewable energy transactions, as that's been a fairly de-risked sector recently. Going on, majority again from private sources as opposed to public, and I know our keynotes mentioned it the other way around, with more private participation required. And then majority going into clean energy in response to our country's energy crisis that we did have during those years. And adaptation was fairly lagging behind mitigation. And I think this goes to the case that financiers value financial returns as opposed to investing for the social good. I'm hoping I can say that on camera. And with regards to what was tracked within those years as well, is that to meet our NDCs and our net zero goals, the climate finance that was tracked of about 131 billion needed to increase by 3 to 5 times to actually meet those goals. So those are just some of the key outcomes from the reports. Just to share again, some of the things or recommendations that came out of the reports was that there's a need to actually scale the pipeline of climate resilient to low carbon projects, and this could be done through capacity building and project preparation. So looking at the earlier stages, moving those projects from initial design and piloting all the way to actually getting them to commerciality. There needs to be a prioritization and scale of grants and concessional finance. If we go back to the very first few slides, grant finance was, I think, less than 1% of track finance, which is kind of deplorable. There needs to be a need to scale international risk-sharing mechanisms as well as innovative finance mechanisms, and hopefully in the panel session I can touch on those innovative finance mechanisms as well. There needs to be an enhancement for government budget tagging. I know there are some initiatives that National Treasury is engaging with, but there needs to be a faster adoption of those initiatives. And then looking at capacitating all stakeholders involved, so working with the private sector, public sector as well, in terms of tagging the climate investments, and then just looking at more public-private partnerships in terms of climate finance opportunities. I think it's a very short and sweet presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions whenever you have a chance. Thanks.
And also for the very interesting presentation. And I'd love to discuss also how you said you're moving barriers for economic viable solutions. Love to hear more about how you define economic viable, and also indeed the depth in the energy transition sector really shows that it's quite de-risked. So interesting to see how it moves beyond every sector. And let's get that goal from 3 to 5 times climate finance up and going. I will now announce our third speaker, Dr. Eric Shakoya. My apologies if I mispronounce your name, but Dr. Shakoya is the network manager of the AUDA NEPAD Southern Africa Network for Biosciences. It's a shared research, development and innovation platform for collaborative research in health and nutrition in Africa. He provides overall leadership of running the network. He manages, administers, and furthers the vision, mission, and objectives of SAN-BIO network and scale up successful bioprojects in the 13 member countries of AUDA-NEPAD. Dr. Chakoya started his career as a scientist. He has been involved in SAN-BIO since 2006, holds a PhD in plant science from the University of Cambridge, MPhil crop science, a Bachelor of Honors and a Master's in project management from the University of Pretoria, and is a Prince 2 TM practitioner. Dr. Chakoya, you have the words.
I hope you can see me. Okay, so I control this from here.
With the clicker.
Oh, with the clicker. Okay, good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's very difficult to speak after lunch because people tend to listen to their tummies than they listen to the presentations. But anyway, so I'm not going to talk about the money. I'm sorry to disappoint you. But we also believe that research is using money to make knowledge. And then when you take the knowledge to make money, that becomes innovation. So I'm talking about making the money. So at a very small scale. Okay. Okay. Am I pressing the wrong thing? Yes. Okay, good. So I'm going to give just a background of AUDA-NEPAD. My network is part of the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD. So it used to be NEPAD before, and then they made it the development arm of the AU. So it's supposed to be looking at implementing programs for the AU. So it's more like your ENDP of the AU. So a lot of is expected of it. So in coordinating some of the continental priorities, infrastructure, capacity building, supporting innovation, financing, and that's a lot, especially in the continent where most of our resources are actually external. They're coming from outside. Even for what we have agreed to pay to do our own programs, we actually don't own it. So unfortunately, that's what it is. But within the context of innovation, we have come up with a program, the Science Technology Innovation Strategy for Africa 2034. So that's the second 10 years of the Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want. So just briefly, so in terms of the priorities of what science has to do, we believe actually science has to be at the center of what we do, because we survive on introductions and imports and all that, but we actually have the brain power. I'm very sure of that. And like I said, we seem to be concentrating on the science, and there is a lot of knowledge, and I think some of it on climate change, on agriculture, a lot of knowledge. But there's no wealth that's coming out of that knowledge. And that's where we are supposed to start. And part of the problem that we have in the continent is we have big companies at the top of the pyramid, and they have all the knowledge, they've got R&D elsewhere, and they move. Then you have in the middle other companies that are doing well, but the biggest majority of our people are sitting at the bottom. And you have a lot of informal sector, or if you want, during the COVID period, all the big companies closed, yeah? So how did people survive? If they had to find a local, someone next to them that can help them to fix their plumbing, to fix their whatever. And the problem with that is most of those guys are not supported by science. Innovation is not supporting the people that are making your cosmetics or the people that are making your hair. You know, Africa, we have very nice, beautiful hair. And our ladies are very good at it. If we could just concentrate on it, it would be a very rich continent. Even African cuisines, they're becoming very popular, they're quite healthy. But the folks concentrating on these are sitting at the bottom of the pyramid. And unfortunately, they contribute about 10% of the GDP. It's the folks that come and do your welding, they do your carpentry, they fix your car. And for those that are making products, that are making furniture, the furniture is not good enough for it to be exported. And this is our continent. So what do we need to do? Science has to start serving these people at the bottom. Imagine if we could just invert the pyramid. Let science help the people at the bottom so that we can start exporting from the local industry that we have from the township economy or from the rural economy and all that, or from agriculture. So we need to increase manufacturing at the bottom. So if you forget everything I've said, our science from the research technology organizations, from including the CSIR, from academia, it has to stop being elite. It has to serve the people at the top. It has to serve the people at the bottom. And this is some of the work that we have been trying to do. So my network covers Southern Africa, the whole of Southern Africa, including all the beautiful countries around Southern Africa. We were in Seychelles with Max at some point, the most beautiful country in the continent. So, when you look at the climate change we're talking about, it affects the people at the bottom of the pyramid. So what we have been trying to do is to look at things that we agree on as a region and the countries that we can contribute to. So I'll give you a case study of what we have worked on. You know, in most of Southern Africa, we have seasons. And in winter, in summer there's food everywhere, especially feed for the animals. But in winter, it's completely dry, like almost this time. The animals have no grass to eat. The water is a bit of a challenge. Even if the water is there, there's no grass. So one of the projects we supported was to look at, can we get food for our animals during winter when it's dry? Is it because there's no grass? Why are the animals, the meat quality is not that good, or the animals are not that strong? Is it because there's no grass? We actually realized the science says, and this is how science, how nature designed it. The animals, including us, we eat grass or whatever, greens. We go and put some droppings somewhere, they fertilize the soil, and then the soil, you know, it grows the grass, and the cycle continues. That was before they introduced the toilets, of course. Right? You see how we kind of mess up nature. So what these guys figured out is somewhere in Zimbabwe, in the top somewhere where they cure tobacco, you actually produce, it produces ash. It's almost complete combustion. When you analyze the ash, it's actually all the micronutrients that you need to grow for the animals to grow. Because the grass is supposed to have everything that the animals need. So you actually don't need the grass. You just need the ash. So that's what we did. So we did all the research from a small lunch box and then started doing the nutritional analysis and also the manufacturing. And we came up with different products, about 15, 20 kgs of blocks. We call it block lick. Why? Because animals also like to eat in groups and gossip. So they come, 10 of them each, they can come and lick on the block. So we call it the block lick. So, and we did one for cattle. We did one for goats. We also did some for game. And then we built a factory out of it. And from the lab, we managed to build a factory, and we also display some of these. And this is from the university. And we learned a lot of things out of it on how to commercialize publicly funded IP. Our thinking is, if we are talking climate change, right, we need to just not think about the big things. You need to think about the people at the bottom of the pyramid and also learn something about taking products. And I can surprise you that if you go in a shop, your local shop here, you might come out with nothing that has come out of our R&D institutions. Nothing. So you can argue if our shops and our industry relied on our local R&D, there will be no industry. But I will discuss, I think, as part of the panel on what did we learn out of it, on working with all that, because whatever we do has got its own challenges. But the underlying point is, as we talk climate change, let's think about bottom of the pyramid, people that are helping the economies to grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I'll take you up. I did remember that we have to stop being elite as research organizations and serve the top as well as the bottom, but I'll do remember as well the block lick and that animals like to gossip. That's also new to me. I would like to introduce the next speaker in line, Dr. Pierre Rialon from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. Pierre Rialon is an economic and policy analyst at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission and holds a PhD in economics and has accumulated 10 years of experience in developing evidence-based tools to design and evaluate the impacts of transformative investments and policies. He has worked as a technical lead in dozens of African countries across several fields, such as impact investment, result-based finance, as well as innovation and industrial policy. Pierre, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot for the great introduction, and thanks a lot for all of you who are here in the room. I know it's one of the last presentations, so thanks again for staying awake. What I'm going to talk about today is, in our project at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission, we try to identify opportunities for investment in science, technology, and innovation. But not only opportunities for investment, but opportunities for investment that are transformative. So the main idea is what we want to identify is where STI can be relevant and can trigger transformative impact or changes. So just to give you a bit of a flavor of the context of our work, without getting too much into the theory, our work is in line with what we call mission-oriented STI policies. Two main things perhaps to say on this is initially STI policies targeted improvement in growth. They were seen as a push toward research, and there's been a shift. The first shift was STI policies were not just seen to trigger growth, but also as a tool for competitiveness. And now we are seeing a broader view of STI policies in which we try to trigger change, positive change in societies. So change in systems, transformative modification of the economy, of the environment, and so on. And so what comes with this is a broader vision of STI policies. So we're not just focusing on research, not just focusing on a small set of actors, but then it comes up with a lot of different actors, such as NGOs, the civil societies, governments, academia, and the private sector. And we try to see how all together we can shape STI policies to trigger transformative changes. So what we've been doing in the past couple of years is what we call STI for SDGs policy, so which stands for Science, Technology and Innovation for the SDGs roadmaps. And what it is in practice, there are policy frameworks in which we identify sustainability challenges at the country level, and we try to see how to use science, technology and innovation to address these challenges. In practice, well, a few main features is it's place-based. So obviously we do our own analysis, our own research, but it has to be tailored to the need of the countries we work in. Second, we dwell on mixed method, especially useful, particularly useful in context in which quantitative data is lacking. So it's, you will see later on how concretely we do this, but these are two very important pillars. And one of the main outcomes of this STI for SDG roadmap is to identify concrete opportunities for STI investment. So we come up, the roadmap come up in the form of a report in which we identify potential opportunities, but it has to be very concrete. The issue we are facing sometimes is we have policy documents, and then you feel there are many areas that should be tackled, and then it's almost like everything is a priority. So you identify, issues, and then you end up with a very broad document that is not easy to use for policymakers to do a smooth implementation. Just a bit of background of this work. So it was initiated in collaboration with the UN Interagency Task Team, which initiated this project on this roadmap. So there were different iterations. I don't want to go too much into all the steps, all the outcomes, but something perhaps important is a guidebook that was done in 2021 on how to develop these roadmaps. And then one thing that directly relates to our work is the completion of 5 roadmaps in sub-Saharan Africa. But let's be more concrete in how we do this. So I think the first step that is interesting is we start with a country diagnosis. We have 3 pillars, and on this pillar, we first look at sustainability challenges. Some countries come to us and say we have different challenges. So food security is a challenge, water is a challenge, perhaps energy is a challenge, and that's difficult to see which one would be a priority. But what we do in practice is we identify with them the one they are interested in working on. So once we know the challenge they want to work on, we dig deeper into it, and we do some mixed method analysis. So we would look at potential indicators on, social and environmental impact. We would look at different analysis documents. We would look at case studies. We would do our own interviews, our own surveys. The idea is to collect as much information as possible from different angles. And this is particularly important because when we work in some countries in which the data is not tailored to the actual or doesn't reflect or pay justice to the country, we really need to emphasize the qualitative aspect of the analysis. So to give you an example, in some countries we worked in, perhaps I will cite the Gambia, if you look at the standard data that we look at to analyze the performance of the, let's say, the STI system, then you realize, okay, there are no much patents in terms of publications, it's quite low. But then once you go there and you start talking to people, you understand that it's not that there is no research, it's not that there is no innovation, it's just that it's not documented. thing is we have one roadmap or policy framework for each country and for each sustainability challenge. So for instance, in the Gambia, we work on food self-sufficiency. In Mauritius, we worked on how to use STI to reduce non-communicable diseases and so on. And perhaps, I mean, there is a non-exhaustive list of challenges, but perhaps the one I would like to mention here to conclude is the difficulty to mobilize local knowledge. First, to understand who has the knowledge, especially in context in which there is a lot of indigenous knowledge that we don't see from the data or from desk research. And then how to mobilize scientific expertise. So I said we mentioned that we work with different groups, but although we could have universities involved in these groups to identify opportunities for investment, what we often observe is universities don't collaborate well enough with the policymakers. So one of the objectives of this project is to see how we can build capacity. So the local knowledge built by research organizations is taken up by policymakers to design policies or even to evaluate policies. Also, when we look at one thematic area, for instance, you look at agriculture, I mentioned full self-sufficiency, you might also need to consider issues related to other systems like water, sometimes even mobility, transport. So one of the key challenges we've been facing is how you integrate this interconnection between all these systems. And last but not least is how do we fundraise for this project, We end up with nice policy frameworks. It looks like, yes, if we do all of this, things will get better. But then very often, not just in this type of project, but you see a nice document, everyone is happy, we communicate, and we put it in a drawer, and then next project. How do we do with this? And so that's why currently what we've been working on is we've been mapping financial flows from Europe to Africa to see what are the potential funders, because even when you want to look at STI, there is no data that tells you like, these are STI flows from Europe to Africa. You first have to use, let's say, standard data and then find a way to categorize STI within these flows. And second, as I mentioned, how we use local knowledge. So the second project we are running now is to help what we call regional center of excellence to build local knowledge and pass it on to policymakers. We're trying to identify whether the research that is being done is actually relevant for the policy challenges that were identified through the different policies. And the last point is we are now working on how to prioritize investments. So I mentioned we have this roadmap, we have a set of potential investments, and what should we start with? And then we are using a method which is based on social multi-criteria analysis, in which we would get an ex-ante evaluation using inputs from universities, local universities. Then on the other hand, we would collect preferences from stakeholders, and we will put it together to then get this ranking. So it's really like a short explanation, it's a bit more than this, but I guess we're going to have opportunities to discuss later on. So thanks a lot for being here.
Thank you, Pierre, for the very clear presentation. And it was interesting to see how you triggered transformative change and really went into the process and how you shape all these different types of data, types of knowledge towards a common agenda, and also looking already at the solutions, at the opportunities, not just having indeed another report on the shelf, but of course the next projects are as important as well. So looking forward to diving into those later in the panel discussion. I would like to introduce our last speaker, Max Pichulik. Max is the co-founder and managing partner of Impact Amplifier, a South Africa-based advisory firm and accelerator that bridges the gap between impact entrepreneurs and investors across the African continent. With over 15 years of experience in impact investing, venture development and sustainable finance, he has worked with startups, corporates and donors to design scalable solutions for climate and social innovation. Under his leadership, Impact Amplifiers has supported hundreds of ventures to become investment ready and unlock blended finance opportunities. Max is recognized as a thought leader on how catalytic capital and ecosystem partnerships can drive Africa's transition towards a sustainable and inclusive economy. Max, the floor is yours.
Thank you, folks. Wow, what an introduction. Thank you. I don't know who your script writers are there, but that is a new one for me. Thank you, Ilka, and thank you for inviting me to this great platform. It's my first time here, well, not first time in this conference center, but to this gathering. So, folks, as an introduction, I have to say firstly that I'm an entrepreneur. I'm South African. I'm an entrepreneur who then set up an accelerator trying to scale business solutions to social problems. I then became a grant funder, and then an investor, and now added ecosystem builder. And I guess we have to do all these things to get what we call the failed ecosystem working. So it's not, I don't do this, I don't wear all these hats and participate in all these roles as a want to, it's a have to, because if our goal is to help these early stage innovations reach some form of scalability, and there's not enough supply of money and not enough development of the readiness of these projects for capital, we have to do lots of things. So by sort of way of introduction to this session and my short time with you here, I really want to just focus on some of the learnings. I've been doing this since 2006, so I've been around for a while, and I've sort of watched the evolution from that period. Impact Amplifier, though, started in 2011. So we are a strange hybrid of an accelerator that works pan-Africanly. Our headquarters are in South Africa, in Cape Town, with offices in Johannesburg. But we also have a separate operating entity and team out of Nigeria that covers West Africa. So our South Africa team covers Southern Africa, and West Africa is covered out of, Central and West covers out of Nigeria. Our different business units blend acceleration or business development, donor-advised funding, deploying grants. We are also a regulated asset manager, which means we deploy patient capital and debt predominantly. I'll talk about blended finance a bit later. But we also have an impact assessment team and ecosystem building team that sits around that. These different divisions all intersect. Our impact assessment team goes out into the market and does that work as well, but also intersects on our acceleration and funding and ecosystem building. Just as a plug, we do have some funding available for any circular businesses in South Africa. So for any of you who want to look up the Nedbank Renew program, there's a grant fund and accelerator for early stage post-revenue circular waste innovations. We have a whole range of different partners. Eric was one of them in our history back in the day. But our partnerships are really there to build collaborative platforms that we can invest and accelerate these companies. In the climate space, we are reaching very close to first close on an early stage 150 million rand debt fund. And that clean tech debt fund is in partnership with UNIDO and the Technology Innovation Agency and the GEF. And we'll be launching that hopefully in Q1 next year. We're also at first close, money's already secure for an early stage regenerative agriculture fund. So those in regenerative agriculture that are trying to transition regeneratively, that's another example of our work. So some of the lessons and key learnings. When we end up working with universities, we have this repeated experience of IP being stuck in the lab. And to me, that means that these research institutions are incentivized to develop patents, develop IP, but not necessarily to commercialize it. And I think what we need to start doing is trying to get IP, as this session is about, out of the lab and into the market and producing bankable investment-ready deals for investors. So as we progress through to the TRLs, that transition into, in whichever form it might be a licensing agreement that gets sold, it might be the partnership with a local entrepreneur, it might be that the PhD who's on the research team ends up being the entrepreneur. We need to figure out those models and figure out the systems that can make that work. And I think this is a huge priority for the formation of private capital. If we don't get that into the market, we don't form private capital, and essentially what we're doing is we're recycling public money and taxpayers' money over time, and essentially IP sits on a shelf for many, many years. In our experience, success comes from deploying capital alongside capacity. But it's not only that. It's the right type of capital and the right type of capacity at the right stage of the ventures, and then figuring out as an ecosystem, as a body of institutions that support those entrepreneurs, how we collaborate together and move through our competitiveness to be able to work together to support the journey from that very, very early nascent stage to that big climate cliff after the first grant to getting into the banking and traditional commercial system. It's that gap that I feel is the largest gap, and it comes through with a combination of different supplies of money and capacity. So I spent a year at MIT and a couple years ago and studied their innovation ecosystem in Cambridge. And what was very interesting that I saw there in Boston that I didn't see on the African continent, because what we did is we studied their ecosystem and then we traveled to African cities and studied the entrepreneurial ecosystems and compared it to their approach. And what's very clear is that our systems still are very separated in silos. This massive institution here at CSIR is deeply embedded in the academia and public sphere, but somewhat disconnected to the VC community, the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I'm sure there are youngsters dying for the patents that are sitting on the shelves here. And it's up to us to take the leadership of changing the system. The problem is not a technical problem. The problem is getting us as systems interveners together and working together in new types of collaborative partnerships. We have to figure out what the embedded interests are. We have to like each other. We want to work together. These things are very important. If we can do that, where the interests all can coalesce and there can be a single vision and we can start to intervene, I think that's going to be very, very powerful. Now we're trying that actually in the clean tech space under what's called the G-STIC program, the Global Clean Tech Innovation Program. The Technology Innovation Agency, UNIDO, and DSTI, with ourselves as a second executing implementation partner, are trying to build a national ecosystem in clean tech for early stage innovations. That means you can have multiple incubators and accelerators sharing data together. We can build ecosystem maps. We can pull one entrepreneur from one funding opportunity to another, and we can start guiding the right type of capacity and capital interventions so that we can get these early stage innovators out of that cliff and out of that death spiral, that early stage death spiral, into the commercial and later stage funding streams that are already available in South Africa. South Africa, unfortunately, is a very conservative society when it comes to capital. This means that getting funding that's not prime plus 14, fully collateralized by your house, with very large deal sizes. If you're a small deal size, you don't have much collateral, you don't have family assets, but you have a really good idea, it's very possible that you might get a couple grants, but then just lay by the wayside, and eventually you give up and go get employed because it's so tough out there. So we have to solve that, folks. we also need to have a different supply of capital. I'm sorry to say, but VC is not going to cut it. We need patient capital. That includes patient equity and patient debt. This means we have to start building different capital structures, meaning we got to take a little bit of grant money into the fund. We've got to take some concessionary debt maybe, take some commercial capital, mix it all into a pot, and develop instruments that are non-collateralized, that an entrepreneur can get, that's flexible, that allows time and patience for that company to get into the market, get product market fits, scale, and grow. It's, I think, the most important thing. And if we can get that right, if we can put a check of 5 million, 8 million rand, not just 100,000 rand here or 50,000 rand there, we can, and if those entrepreneurs can hit their milestones and they can start generating revenue and cash flow, then they can start fitting into the traditional commercial streams, because they would have built a balance sheet, an asset base, and they will probably make their covenants and their collateral requirements. Local is lacquer. It's a term we have if you're not South African, meaning we need local money going into local businesses, building our manufacturing, and scaling and exporting. We can't have our research institutions and our entrepreneurs giving away our IP and it going overseas. We need jobs here, we need skills here, we need to localize, and we need to be a little bit more selfish about that as well. That's not to say that licensing agreements and having IP move overseas, if it's not a priority, not a bad thing. It is a good thing, because there's potentially revenue to be earned for the research institutions and the innovators. But I think the point here is that we need to drive local job creation in South Africa as our primary. And you folks who work in research institutions, you are the engines of innovation. Without you, we as Africans will remain poor. We only get the margin, we only get the value, we only start growing and becoming more productive if our research institutions start implementing. And I think Eric has a very, very salient point, is that we need to start developing innovations that are not suitable for necessarily only Silicon Valley or for Europe, but meet the needs of Africans in our local industries. The other thing that's also very interesting is I try to take money from overseas, and if I'm lending or taking on debt in euros or US dollars, and I'm in a local currency that depreciates against that, I'm never able to return the capital according to what the investment requirements are. So I actually need to take money in rands and return that money in rands. It's the safest and better option for all of us. On that regard, and this is my last point, I know it's time's up, thank you there, Ilka, I saw that signal. We must break the typical fund management model. What happens is fund managers come here and they get paid by management fees. Typically, those management fees are 2% of the money they manage, and they end up going, oh, you know, it's too difficult to invest into this African entrepreneur who needs R1 million. I'd rather spend the same amount of time on a 50 million rand deal. So they end up coming into the early stage space, and they end up leaving that space because they can make their management fees work with bigger ticket sizes. But we actually need to do volume at small ticket sizes to see the job creation, the economic development come out. So thank you, folks. I hope that was useful.
Thank you very much, Max, for that very clear presentation. I wrote so many things down that I cannot pull out one of them, but I think very interesting points and very clearly explained also for the community that is maybe not too directly linked sometimes with industry. So I think a lot of take-homes to take with us, and the new types of collaborative frameworks really stand out, and we really have to work with that. I also loved your graphics, so thank you very much for the beautiful presentation. For the time left, I would like to call all the speakers to the stage and to have a couple of last discussion points that we can dive into. Okay, thank you all for your presentation. I think we have a good group here that each specializes in its own field within the pipeline that we are discussing. And I would like to go to the first speaker, again, to Kwan. As you said, you highlighted already a bit of the instruments, but looking at the large financing gaps that are clearly present to drive STI climate innovation forward in South Africa, could you elaborate a bit about the interesting de-risking mechanisms that you are testing and that unlock financial streams, please?
Okay, so we are involved with two mechanisms at different stages of businesses. So on an SMME level, we have a Green Outcomes Fund, and on an infrastructure or sustainable infrastructure, we have a sustainable finance product that we are assisting in. So at the SMME level, we have what is known as the Green Outcomes Fund, which is an initiative that was assisted or funded by National Treasury's Jobs Fund. And essentially what that looks at is working with fund managers to actually incentivize them for investing in green investments. So as part of a fund manager's portfolio, for every investment or company that they invest in, for every job that's created, and what we call a green job, that financier would be paid an outcome. So essentially what it does for that financier or fund manager is allows them to actually look at a new portfolio of investments. So that's where sustainable innovation or sustainable technology lies, is that those businesses are now looked at by financiers. So that's at an SMME level. At a larger scale infrastructure level, we have what is known as the Sustainable Infrastructure Development and Finance Facility. So we call it SIDAF because that is quite a mouthful. Essentially what that looks at is taking project preparation funding, so grant funding from donor funders, to cover the cost of project preparation for intermediate municipalities. So moving them from technical feasibility for the sustainable infrastructure projects to bankability. To just add on the impacts of those two initiatives, the Green Outcomes Fund worked with 4 fund managers in its initial stages, created about, I think, 900 or plus 900 jobs, prominent indirect and direct jobs, as well as facilitated, I just get the number right, 290 million rand in investments de-risked, and supported about 14 green SMMEs. On the infrastructure space, we've identified 8 municipalities with sustained clean audits. We were able to basically discover a project pipeline of 2.2 billion rand of sustainable infrastructure projects, and as well as getting that first initial set of project preparation funding or donor funding of 72 million rand, so covering the cost. So essentially de-risking at two levels. Thank you.
Okay, super interesting. I think definitely I saw Max already nodding a couple of times. I think it links also beautiful to unlocking more South African capital and lending in rent, the last point you made. It could be interesting to look at that further. Maybe going then to Max Pichulik for a question. You touched upon this in your presentation about incentivizing research to researchers to get their IP out of the labs. I think this is a quite common problem in a lot of RTOs and universities. There's an ample amount of intelligence being created. It's funded by the government, and it often stalls, or it's picked up by very big corporations that there is no funding route going back to the researchers. So you said that, do you have any ideas on how to incentivize more that we get that information more out of the universities and get them into businesses and economic businesses? And also, what do you see as the most common challenge for this problem? Is it culture driven? Is it because there is no good incentive? Is it maybe institutionalized? Is it distrust in the sector? Some ideas from me, but go ahead.
Yes, so maybe a few ideas. You know, I think when you're in an environment where there's loads of grant funding, there's no need to change. There's no need to incentivize often. So I think it's when in times when budgets start to get stressed, the funding budgets aren't there anymore, that perhaps there is a willing ear for leadership to start thinking about incentives in a very, very different shape and form that drives revenue versus research grants as being the driver of the sustainability. I think that's one important layer. There are a couple more. I think it's very important for research universities and institutions to start developing commercial skills at the very early stages of the IP development process. So you really are thinking about the product, the market sizing, the segment, the segmentation, the business model really from the beginning. And it comes back to incentives, incentivizing those teams to potentially also earn personally if they aren't already. And then lastly, I do think there is a case to, and I think this might be an easier fix, is to try and work very closely with commercialization partners. This takes risk, it takes relationship building, it takes time, because it's not going to take 1 year or 2 years or 3, it might take 5, so you've got to find the right partner. And I think the mix between the commercialization and the research within a broader ecosystem that isn't sitting in silos but working collaboratively can really work to get that out. And I think the first objective is to take that commercial partnership to getting the first exit or getting the first fundraise, so you can really start seeing and feeling what that is at some form of scale. This isn't to say that tech transfer offices aren't doing it already, but I don't think they're doing it at scale, and I don't think they're producing IP that's suitable for investors, that pulls out the roadblocks to bring private capital formation coming in.
Okay. These are very clear points. Thank you very much. I think a lot of things to think about and take with us to our organizations. Next in line we have Pierre. Maybe also building a bit on that. You said at the end that prioritization is needed when you make these STI roadmaps. Could you maybe indicate how you prioritize, what the strategy behind it is? How do you prioritize all the things that need to happen? And linking also to what has happened, to what is said, does one of the indicators linked to the economic impact that those STIs could make? Is there the business case also one of the indicators?
No, thanks a lot for the question. I think it's a very difficult question. And perhaps one thing that is very important is whether you prioritize based on what you think would have the highest impact for the country, or whether you would make this prioritization ranking based on what people want. And what we're trying to do in our current project is to combine both. So what we would do is we would have a list of potential interventions, and then we would first define with our local universities what are the criteria through which we're going to analyze the ex-ante impact of these investments. So that's the first thing we would do. And then we would collect the preferences of different stakeholders in the country and try to combine those two to run a model to then give a ranking. But what could be also interesting is you have the preferences of some groups of stakeholders that you can disentangle. You can see perhaps if we look at NGOs, the group of the civil society / NGOs, then this is what we should potentially do. If you look at the private sector, this is what we should do. And perhaps to connect with the last point is then when you want to look at the investors, then you could also try to find who is matching in terms of preferences. So then you can do something that seems to be more sustainable in the sense that this is what people want, this is what has impact, and there's a consensus. One big thing is to bring transparency on how decisions are made. If at the country level we set up prioritization ranking, I think what's even more important is that everyone knows how this has been done. So this is one of the key things I would say.
Thank you. Yes, it's very interesting that you localize these indicators and criteria specific to the country and then indeed match make kind of with the solutions to see the preference of the countries and the market and all the different stakeholders involved. Thank you very much. And then I go to our last speaker for a question. You hinted already yourself at this during your presentation. You have worked a lot with the group you think science should be aimed at, the people who are building our economy. And you have a lot of experience with it, but there comes also a lot of challenges with this work. Could you expand a bit on how it is working with the people who build our economy?
Yeah, thank you. I think Max has said a lot on this one, but I wanted to bring a few points. When we are talking about especially taking knowledge from the lab to the market, I think silos are the worst thing that can happen. Mm-hmm. And there's also, I think, like the definitions are not right. So there is an assumption that someone will get IP from UP and hand it to the CSIR, and then the CSIR comes and finds Max to help to accelerate what projects and the business, and then it ends up on the market. Mm-hmm. The reality is that's actually not correct. There's several reasons to that. Number one, if we take industry and we take academia, it's a kind of an equal yoking, because we have done as part of NEPAD looking at how is research organized, and we look at how are the skills and the skill and the qualifications. An average researcher or scientist in the industry has gotten honors. An average researcher in academia is a PhD. Mm-hmm. Put them together and tell me who talks. It's the PhD. But the PhD is the least in terms of knowledge about the market. The industry is the one that links to the market. And get to finance. Where are we putting the money? We are putting the money on the academic, on the researcher, the CSIR, or the university. And if you look at the British when they were going towards Brexit, they did it the other way around. They put money on industry and put a condition that you can only use this money if you bring academia with you. That's actually a better model than put money on the lab and go and find the industry. They won't, because already they are highly qualified and they think they know everything, yet they actually don't know much. So it's an unequal yoke. So Max already gave a solution, partnership, and we have done a lot of that. So we have done, most of our projects we have said, for you to, if you want money from us, in the academia, bring a commercialization partner. I want someone who understands the market and how this product works. And we actually did. So Max was helping us with some of the converting our academics into business people. And we succeeded with funding from the Finnish and South African government, entrepreneur, and our implementers, 10 million euros. We came up with 6 startup companies and a number of more than 10 products, and they're still surviving. I've already presented some of those from the university, but the solution was, bring me someone who understands the market. That's our biggest problem. There are too many people talking, but also Max talked about the technology transfer organizations. Usually it's just 1 or 2 people per university. How can one person save the whole university? We were asked, what would you change on that program? We said, would you change tech transfer offices? Nothing personal with them. Because why? When we wanted them to list the background IP, they were not there. They only came when there was a dispute. Because now they want to flex their muscles and they want to sue someone. But across the continent, we don't sue each other. Government don't sue each other. We talk. So in terms of collaboration, I think we need to like lawyers We need to be able to get our tech transfer offices. And we also went to Harvard, MIT, understand the ecosystem, Emory, Finland. You realize the difference is actually those little things. Finally, for us to get products out there, we need to change the way we look at innovation. And one way to do that is we don't have infinite time to tinkle, play around with things. There is too much innovation or over-innovation. And Max was right. It's impossible to get IP from any of our institutions in this continent. I can bet elsewhere you can go into the office this morning. At 10 o'clock, you have your IP, you're going to commercialize. Here, people like to see what they've done. So we need to get things quickly out there. It's called rapid experimentation. COVID has taught that we don't have 15 years. Life is too short. Get to the answer. If the answer is not the correct one, kill it. Then rapid experimentation, prototyping. We don't have research universities. We have teaching universities. They are there to teach, and then we have unemployment here and there because we are given knowledge, not skills. So can we get institutions that can prototype, show how this thing can work so that the investor can have confidence on whether it works or not? And then lastly, from our experience, most projects fail not because the science is wrong. They're just badly managed. We manage by experience. Project management is one of the worst, especially among our researchers. They are not trained and they are expected to be good project managers. Because you're a good scientist, you think you're a good project manager. Guess what? Actually, that's not true. I could speak the whole day on this one, but I think that's what we need to do. We need to get people that know what they are doing to be able to manage projects so that they can fail because they didn't work, not fail because someone just didn't think about the regulation or the market readiness. They just thought about the science, which is only 20% of what the whole product thinks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you very much for touching upon all the pain points in research. I think it was very correct. And thank you also for already highlighting the one thing that you could change, because that is the question I want to ask all of you. I'm sorry, we are out of time, so I have to cut a bit in our discussions. But I would like to give all of you still the floor for answering the question that if you had the chance to change one element in the African science, innovation, finance, scale-up ecosystem to accelerate the uptake of technologies for impact, what would it be? So thank you very much already, Dr. Shaikaya, to answer that we have to change our tech transfer offices, but I leave the word to Kwan to answer the question as well.
Thank you so much for the question. I think I'm going to take a note out of my fellow panelists and just echo Max's words again in terms of making that early stage capital available. So looking at more of those patient capital in terms of patient debts and patient equity, allowing for that capital to flow, especially when you get to that point of a startup, what do you call it, valley of debt, where they struggle post-piloting to actually obtain finance. So I think that's one. And I'm actually keen to see more of Max's Clean Tech Debt Fund, and hopefully I can feed into that pipeline as well. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
To save repeating, I probably would have said what Kuhn said, but if I go out on a limb, one thing we could do is privatize the tech transfer office. Build a balance sheet, let that venture office build a venture studio if it feels it needs to develop the IP in-house and then spin it out later. Maybe just needs to license it and sell it out overseas. Maybe they do interventions to partner with entrepreneurs, but go into a private-public partnership and then allow that commercial lens to look backwards into the research process. Go right to the beginning and get them thinking about what they should and shouldn't be doing. But I think that could only happen if our national government, for instance, was very clear about what its priorities were in research in certain sectors, so that we did this in clusters and sectors that we knew, okay, if we're building EVs here and we're developing IP around lithium batteries and mobility, and that we're taking a clustered, deep, commercial, public-private partnership approach, but we've got not only the balance sheets of the private sector, we've also got the public sector in the background to back it, and then you could create very, very interesting fund vehicles. So I think that would be most interesting to me, at least.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, first, I very much agree with what has been said already. But one thing that I have in mind is when we talk about transformative investment, we have a challenge to align incentives. So sometimes what the public sector would want versus the private sector is an issue, and I think we need to explore innovative financial schemes in which we realign incentives. So, for instance, in the field of result-based finance, I think there are like promising avenues to explore that haven't been explored enough, in my opinion.
Change.
You can change, yes, if you can keep it under 1 minute.
I would change maybe 2-3 things. The first one is, in terms of funding, I would reward good behavior, not bad behavior. We are funding the wrong people. And people don't like to hear this, but it's true. We should be funding partnerships that increase the success of us getting products out there. Then the next thing is, I would teach people how to count, because I think we are measuring the wrong things and giving people the wrong KPIs. I was in Ethiopia the other time. The Minister of IT, Technology and IT, he said, my KPI is simple. How many companies have I created and how many jobs? As a minister, that's what is measured on. Look at our KPIs. We are measuring just the wrong things. So people behave that way. And then I will not change the issue of the tech transfer offices. I don't want to see them when there is a dispute. I want to see them to promote innovation and get products out there. But I would add that when I looked at the US tech transfer offices and our tech transfer offices, the US system, the deal maker would have 20 years industry experience. Our tech transfer officer has never been to industry. So how are they going to do miracles and get a deal? I would change that. Get experienced people like Max, bring him to UCT, let him do the deals. Of course, he can only come when it's privatized. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a very rich discussion, and I feel that we can keep on going, but I'm closing this session now. It was super interesting. I see questions in the room, but we are already 10 minutes over time, but I'm sure the panelists will keep on being here in the room, so make sure that you grab them to ask your questions. I have a lot to take home, but thank you very much for all your input, and a round of applause for the speakers.